Hello, Desmond. So nice to have you here with us on the Artisan podcast.
Kati, thank you. It's my pleasure. I'm excited to lean in and have a wonderful conversation with you today.
Yeah, me too. So, for our audience here, Desmond and I met at the ATD conference, the Association of Talent Development, down in San Diego, gosh, a couple of months ago in May sometime. And Desmond is a master facilitator, a senior consultant, and an implementation leader in equity, diversity, and inclusion front at the Arbinger Institute. And I was so fortunate to walk into one of his presentations, and I just loved the message. I loved how you presented and everything that you shared, that I'm thrilled that you were available and open to have this conversation with us today.
Oh, thank you. Man, it's extremely enjoyable to love what you do, and to be freed by it. I really feel that when I'm up there at these conferences that I can share what's meaningful, what's in my heart, what I feel is important, and what, I think a lot of people sense, but they haven't found a way to maybe articulate it themselves. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What I especially appreciated was how you were able to take this topic that is top of mind and many people out there are talking about it, but you were able to humanize it, and you were able to really allow the audience that was there, and I felt it too, be able to connect to one another from a human to human level. And that obviously that is so important in every environment, every circle that we're in. In our conversation, I really wanted to bring that into the workplace and into
Yes.
specifically hiring and integrating new people into the mix. But before we get into that, I'd love to just know, how did you get involved in this line of work?
Um, I started off in the prison system. Um, I was a therapist in the prison system, and it was my first introduction to marginalized people struggling to make it in society outside of my own personal experiences. There is nothing, I can't think of too many things more difficult than coming out of a prison system and returning back as a citizen in society, and not feeling that you have the capacity or the resources to be able to do that successfully. So I went from a therapist to a manager to a state director, where I was in charge of all the programming outside of the prison in the state of Utah. From that, I started teaching courses in forensic social work at the University of Utah. I'm a licensed clinical therapist. And so it all came together. And I started doing just like this, like mini podcasts and videos about the things I'd learned. And then my son passed away. I lost a child. He was a freshman in college. He completed suicide. And I found myself just in this unique position where I was like, okay, Desi, you've been through some stuff now. You know what it's like to lose a child to something horrific. What can you do differently in society to create greater senses of inclusion and belonging? And I think that's what motivates me. My son seemed isolated and alone, even though we talked every day, and it was a lot of communication and people cared about him. There just wasn't a sense of belonging for him. And so I wanted to do something about that. And so I just took all this background and my knowledge, and as I was working with Arbinger, I joined their design team, and we created a curriculum called Outward Inclusion. And I've spent the last few years just sharing the message of what does it look like in your organization, in your space, when we can, number one, see the humanity of another person. And then number two, understand our impact on that humanity. And as simple as that sounds, there are things that we all have that interfere with our ability to do those two basic things. And so that's so I've been working all over this country, all over internationally, just doing the work, being motivated by the loss I've experienced and the knowledge that I've gained.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and just heartfelt condolences. I don't know how long ago that was, but it's always fresh to anyone who's lost someone right here. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I appreciate that you took something that was so devastating and were able to turn it around and then bring impact to others, positive impact to others from it.
Yes. Yeah, I hope so. What I've learned is that loss is energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's bona fide energy, and either you do something with it, or it also does something with you.
Yep.
There's really no, I would like to say there's all these other options, but either that is the same energy that can just really, and it's just hard. And I've seen both of it in my life. So I'm not trying to say I'm on one side or the other, but it's loss is a lot of energy that you need to transform into something, or else that loss will transform you.
Oh, 100%.
And
100%.
so that's what I've learned, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for including us in that conversation.
Oh, by all means.
Yeah. So let's go back to the 2 pointers that you
Mhm.
mentioned. First one being seeing the humanity in each other. Did I get that correctly?
Yes.
And then the second one was impacting one
Mhm.
another through that humanity. So can you talk a little bit more about that as it impacts the workspace, and specifically as we bring in new people into that workspace, a brand new hire joining an existing team that's been together for a long time?
I love that, Kati. I always say to people, good people, good, hardworking people are often blind to their impact on others.
Hmm.
And so the first step to understanding my impact is to humanize aspects of the workplace. Because if I'm not humanizing the workplace and I'm seeing people as objects, either vehicles that are doing the work I need them to do, or obstacles that aren't doing the work I need to do, or relevancies. When I see people in that lens, what's happening is I'm spending a lot of time justifying my view of a human being, and spending a lot less time understanding that human being in a way in which I could be more effective. Thus, the new employee, right, coming into the workplace, my view and my objectification of that new employee can really impact my ability to improve their work life and work situations. If they are just, here comes a new employee, it's going to take 9 months to get them on board, another 3 months to do this, and 1 month. If all they are is a problem now that I have to carry until I get them to a point of efficiency, they will sense that and they will resist.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've learned is that all people will resist being objectified. And if we can start looking at the resistance in our lives, like how we are seeing people and their resistance to us, we can start to recognize maybe there are ways in which I see this person, ways in which I objectify this person, that might be creating some of this resistance.
So you're saying that they're resisting because there's feeling or sensing something coming from us that's creating that. They're basically putting their guards up. Is that what's happening?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's twofold.
Okay.
One thing, yes. A lot of times when we have resistance, it's because people have a sense of objectification.
Okay.
That they see us objectifying them. Now, the twofold is this. We may be doing things to objectify them, and they may have emotional luggage that they bring with them to the circumstance where they've been objectified in the past that can also create, some of those feelings. And so it can be twofold. It's not necessarily all on our side. As leaders, as people who are supervising and people who we're coworkers and we have direct impact on people, we can only work on the latter part, our impact. How are we impacting these folks where they feel seen, they feel valued, they feel they're a part of the process, and they feel in the midst of all the difficulties that come along with work that they matter to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that their
That's the
voices are
part
going to
we
be
control.
heard. Yeah, so we can
That's
hear
the part
their voices, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's not some you can read a lot of books, right? About how to influence people and make friends, how to, you can read a lot of books, and gain all the tools in the world. But people have a sense of when you acknowledge their humanity or not.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've recognized is that in the hustle and bustle of work, in the hustle and bustle of day-to-day work and trying to accomplish what I need to accomplish, at times we are not humanizing the process. We do not see people as people, and they are responding in a way that's resisting to us as their leaders or coworkers.
Okay. So what would you recommend, both from the person who's starting their job, because as you said, they're also bringing their baggage into the mix. We all have them, right? We travel with them. Hopefully one day we can set them down and lose that baggage. So we're bringing that with us into a new role, and our teammates, supervisors, all of them, everybody has their baggage of life with them.
Yes.
Right? How do we go about creating a space and creating dialogue around not allowing that to permeate? I would imagine that even during the interviewing phase, that probably can show up, right?
Yeah.
That's
For sure.
another conversation for us.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Hey, we're here for an hour. Let's get it done. I will say this, and this is something like I've recently done in my own life. I recently moved to a beautiful little town on the border of Maryland on the Pennsylvania side of the Mason-Dixon line. 35 minutes from Baltimore, Amish countries. I get the best of both worlds. I can have a fresh pretzel one night and the next night a crab cake. Anyway, I'm in heaven. But we've been here for a year. We've spent more time inside of our house, fixing up our house, than maybe engaging with the community. So I go to my wife, I'm like, hey, it's 4th of July. The Lions International Club is looking for volunteers. Let's do some social exercise. Let's just get out and meet people and connect with people. Just social exercise. And we went out there for 2 days. We volunteered and, flipped burgers and prepped hot dogs and hamburgers and met a lot of people in the community, right? We have our social baggage. We have our challenges. We have fears that are associated with connecting with new people, being in a new space. In the midst of all that, we have to practice social exercise, social work, our ability to connect with others in meaningful ways. And so if I am the new employee, I may be disappointed if I'm waiting for someone to engage me in a positive way. I remember one of my first days at the prison. I had worked as a correctional officer for many years, became a therapist. The correctional work wasn't for me. I wanted to really help, and I didn't feel I was helping. So I became a therapist. It's my first day as a therapist, and one of the supervisors goes, "Hey, what are you doing here? Don't you work somewhere else?" I'm like, "No, I came here." And he looked at me, he goes, "Why would you do that? This place is horrible."
Welcome.
That was my first day at work, right? Wow. So sometimes the social exercise we get from others is not the most positive thing. And sometimes as new employees, if we don't engage multiple people in a social way, we'll find ourselves in a situation where the people that are engaging us can be bringing a lot of negative energy.
Mm.
And so for the new employee, social engagement and social exercise, meeting new people, communicating with people, sharing your background, gaining a deeper understanding of others, it's just a great way to acclimate very quickly into the process. For new employees, it's the same type of work. Every person that comes in, there should be a system in place where we can understand them in a way that extends beyond the work. And what I mean by that is when people feel seen, valued, you understand their role, and they feel supported, they work at higher levels than those that don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this generation that I come from, where, hey, you know what, I care about you because I gave you a paycheck. Like, that's my saying that you've worked, good job, is you get a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are like, well, Desmond, I'm confused with all this seen, valued, have a voice, roles. Like, back in the day, you gave me a paycheck and I'm happy. And people have changed. Pandemics will do that to them. People have changed. They want more from their work environments. And as leaders, a part of our social exercise is helping those people that we're supervising or co-working with feel that sense of belonging that's needful for performance, for work performance.
What would you say to the managers who are in charge of creating that welcome, open environment? How do they go about and kind of humanize that connection and roll out the carpet, that welcome carpet for their new people?
You know what? I've got a great story. When I was a state director, I realized that a lot of people didn't like me. They just didn't like me. So I was reflecting, what can you do when people like inherently don't like you? Because I think it's the position. You're in charge. You can make hard decisions. But I think it's also like the personality. Some people like my personality. Some people can't stand me. It's the nature of life. It's okay. But I realized something as a leader. The only way for people to see you or recognize your personhood is for you to make them a priority. So as a leader, everyone that got hired, I told all my regional managers, you go to the HR to make sure they get all the paperwork done. Then you come right to my office and we have a 30-minute meet to learn meeting. I get to know and learn about that person. And in that meeting, I got to learn about that person. I got to express appreciation for that person. I got to let them know I was here to support them. In 30 minutes, you can accomplish so much. And over the course of several years, all of a sudden, I became a very well-liked, well-appreciated supervisor. It's because I simply took the time, as we say in the DEI space, you close the proximity, right? Like, so instead of being this supervisor over here, now I'm the supervisor right here in support of you. You don't have to guess who I am. I'm right there. The proximity is closed, and I'm right there to support you.
Close the proximity. I love that.
Yes, supervisors need to close the proximity so that the people that are being supervised by them, the supervisees, don't have to guess about the type of person they are.
So really showing up as an authentic leader themselves.
Yeah. If they're willing to do it. Some people don't like themselves. I work with hundreds, thousands probably of leaders that when you get down to it are very nervous, very insecure, and worried about how people are seeing them and their ability to lead. So if I'm stuck in that space, how am I going to be anything for anyone else?
Yeah, very true. Yeah. if, I mean, if one isn't open, if they can't close the proximity for themselves, right? It's
There
going
we
to be
go.
hard to do it for somebody else.
Oh, Gati,
Yeah.
beautifully stated. At the heart of most conflict is our own internal struggles with ourselves.
Mm,
And when we're treating people poorly, it's simply a reflection of our own self-worth.
mm. What's that baggage again?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Emotional baggage. It's some
Yep.
stuff. And it's universal. Make no mistake, it's universal. We
Yeah.
all carry things with us that we have to address, we have to acknowledge, we have to love,
Mm-hmm.
to work through it and to heal. Like, I can't tell you, I spent many years as a therapist, and the number one issue I saw was that people were so resistant to their imperfections.
Mm.
They were so resistant to the fact that they wanted to accomplish something and they couldn't. And I'd spend a lot of time just saying, can you love that? Can you love that part of yourself? I promise you. Can you love that part of yourself? Can we do that first?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we can start making some grounds on changing the behaviors that you want to change.
Mm. Love that. Yeah. Sometimes easier done, said than done. But if
Yes,
we,
yes.
yeah,
That,
but if we
and
work
it's
towards that.
and Kati, that's okay too.
Yeah.
It is okay. Like I have lifetime struggles that I'm currently dealing with, that I'm trying to overcome.
Mhm.
Things I'm trying to get better at. And I struggle in those things all the time. And you know what I call that? Being a human being. I'm very human. There are just elements of my life that are very human,
Mhm.
that I need to improve on and get better on, and things I need to love about myself. It's hard to love, and just kind of going through that whole process.
Yeah. Understood. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. So that was point one that
Mhm.
we first talked about. Let's talk about that second pointer. And if you could, I know I probably butchered it the first time I mentioned it. Can you remind me, humanizing or creating impact with that?
Yeah.
You say,
So what I work with a lot of organizations, and a lot of training has put us in this space. It's like, well, my intent is good. Let's just assume everyone has good intent.
mm,
Let's just assume that we're all just, in the midst of our humanism, we all have good intent, and sometimes we're going to have conflict. And I think that's a good base, like, place to start.
mm-hmm,
But there's something we can do a little bit better. And that is having the courage to understand how we're directly impacting the people we lead or we co-work with in a positive and or negative way. I think that's the kicker. Do we have the courage, right, to ask the right questions in a way where we can get the answers we need to understand our impact?
mm-hmm.
Because until we do, we're just kind of a okay leader.
Yeah, that is such an important pointer there. I was actually just talking about this the other day with someone about the interviewing process and how in some companies, multiple rounds of interviews are necessary and multiple stakeholders are necessary to make a decision about a candidate moving forward or not. And the intent may be to include all stakeholders in that decision making, but the impact to that candidate sometimes is either the company can't make a decision, or they don't like me, they're not going to move forward with me. And we just don't sometimes recognize that our intent may be a good intent, but the impact and the implication that it has to that person is a completely different one. So just that awareness is so huge.
No, it is. And that, like I said, that's one aspect,
Yeah.
right? And it's, look how powerful that is. Like if I can just address that aspect and we can figure out a system to interview people in a way in which they feel that they're joining a meaningful work family,
Mm-hmm.
joining a group of people that are willing to support them, instead of running them through this gauntlet, right? You feel like you're being run through a gauntlet. There are different types of ways. If you can interview me 6, 7 times, but each time, if I feel more at home with the organization, I'm fine. But if you're interviewing me 5 or 6 times and I'm feeling unseen, I'm feeling like I'm more or less going through a process instead of being a part of a process,
Yeah.
then it's gonna create the consequences you're talking about. That's why when we talk about this humanization, like, how does a human feel going through 6 interviews?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we ask them and understand our impact?
Mm-hmm.
Leaders are busy, and sometimes they just feel they do what they think is right. And they're not asking the impact questions. They're not figuring out the pros and cons. So they're just decent. They're not great. Hopefully they're good, but they're just decent leaders,
Mm-hmm.
unaware of how they're truly impacting people. Or even worse, Kati, I really know I'm having a negative impact, but I don't know what to do differently. So I'm just going to keep an emotional distance from everyone, continue to do my job, and do it in a way where I can maintain my job and stay blind to the impact, because if I dug deeper into it, it would come up in a way where I might need to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, the most liberating thing we can do in life is change.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to be different. Like, I work in spaces where people are waiting for me to say or do something wrong. Many of us work in those spaces
Mm-hmm.
where, if you're in the DEI space, the inclusion or belonging space, and it's become politicized, people are waiting for you to say something to validate their view or to be in opposition of their view.
Mm-hmm.
And in situations like that, I have to be willing to humanize that process and say, yeah, I did say that, and that's not appropriate. Or, hey, I didn't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as I say, and we say in Arbinger, it's not about being right. It's about getting it right.
Mm.
So I can be my most authentic self if my mindset is, oh, if I make a mistake, I'll just work on getting it right. But some people are so hell-bent on being right that they can't move to that stage of getting it right, which would greatly improve their capacity to lead others
Mm-hmm.
or to work with others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's powerful. That recognition itself is powerful to come to that as a leader of an organization, as a manager of a team, to recognize just what you said, the D&I space is about belonging, and to just really to have the not only the foresight but the strength to step into it, stepping into this unknown. Maybe it's uncomfortable, but that's okay, because that's growth comes from that,
Yeah,
and that's a good thing.
I
So
love that.
yeah.
And I would add, the DEI space is about office and work productivity.
Mm-hmm.
We neglect that part of it sometimes. It is about work productivity. Research has been out for a long time about how people perform when they feel a sense of belonging. So we have to stop putting this DEI thing in a space. And this is one of the things I talk about in my ADT talk, where if I'm a leader, like, DEI is over here, like away from me. And I'm just doing the training. Like, I'm trying to do this inclusion training to make sure my organization is going to be productive, but I haven't included myself in inclusion work. It's about the other folks. It's about the females. It's about the people of color. It's about with people different sexual orientation than I am. And we're missing the main fact that it is about you, no matter what your background or orientation or beliefs are. If we all are working on inclusion, instead of it being something these marginalized groups need in my organization, that's when it fails. It fails when I don't include myself in the inclusion process as a leader. And I'm somehow supporting and helping all these other groups, not recognizing that when I feel included in those groups, and we're all feeling included, that productivity is a direct result.
So powerful. It takes me to me, actually. It
Hmm.
takes me to me. You know, I'm an immigrant, and I came here when I was in high school, and in the middle of ninth grade, we immigrated to the States, and I felt so excluded. Oh my gosh, I'm from Iran originally, and this was in the middle of the hostage crisis. Probably not the best time.
Hmm.
At least I felt not the best time to be Iranian at that time. But I just felt very excluded. But I don't think anyone really excluded me. I excluded me because it felt, it was my protective layer of, let me exclude so that nobody says anything because that may hurt.
Yeah, 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 and there may be a twofold thing there, Kati. It might be, one is I'm going to protect myself because that's a lot easier than opening myself up to criticism. And there's also the second part of it that could be, I literally came from I literally came from a different country where maybe society doesn't see it as a great place. And because of that, I might be susceptible to things that aren't not nice. And so it can be twofold. And not so, and that's the complexity of the work. Like, is that like there's certain circumstances where as an African American male, I'm probably a little overcautious, like in how I engage people and how I communicate with people. I have bosses that are like, man, Desi, you are way too agreeable, you know? And I'm thinking in my mind, like, do you guys want me to be disagreeable? I don't want to come off as the disagreeable Black guy that you work with. Right? Agreeable works for me. Can you just let it work? And so there's parts of it that are grounded in my overprotection of myself, and parts of it grounded in a lot of evidence that I've had over the course of my life, where people look at my skin color and treat me and differently and make assumptions about me based upon that. And so it's that twofold nuance there, right? That we all, like I said, and it's universal. You've had to experience that. I've had to experience that. Many people experience that in a lot of different spaces now.
How do we ensure that in the workspace, in the hiring space, in the recruiting space, that we can create this, we can close this proximity, I use my words here, where we can create the sense of belonging sooner than later?
Yes.
I think we recognize we need to do that, but sometimes it's too late, and a candidate's like, I don't fit in, I'm leaving sooner than if they had given it the time.
Yeah, that's a great question. Organizations need a common language. They need a common way to communicate. As an Arbinger Institute, we try to provide people with that common language. But like worst case scenario, everyone in the organization needs to understand this is our organization's definition of inclusion, of belonging, of diversity, of equity. Like we need a common language so that we can take care of the people that we're bringing in. The other part is we need to figure out where are our weak spots. Because most organizations are struggling internally with how they're treating each other. And so how can I expect the new people to come in and have any of a different experience? You know, and so we need to work on the language, really focus on what's going on internally in our organization, how we're currently treating each other, and then create a plan in which to humanize the process across the board. I know so many organizations, they want to create all these new processes for all the incoming people. And the staff that are there like, what?
Yeah. What about me? Yeah.
$1,000 bonus. they get $1,000 bonus for getting hired. What about what? And so like, and I understand the needs to get people in the door, but I'm telling you, like, you need to humanize the process, get the common language, figure out how to take care of people internally, then create a plan that involves the incoming people as well as the internal people in this process of belonging.
Because otherwise you'll be creating separation.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's one of the common issues we have when organizations are trying to implement DEI work, is that it's not inclusive. It's not inclusive.
It's the D part of it. They're trying to diversify, or
They're trying to diversify,
yeah.
and it's not inclusive, and it's not creating levels of belonging that they would like. And so a lot of organizations are like, what do we do now? Well, get a common language, take care of your people internally, make sure they're supported, and whatever you do over the course of the next few years to create a strong inclusion and belonging system, do it across the board. I tell people at all levels. I tell people everything that you should do could be implemented across the board. And it would be super helpful. Like, and if you can't do it across the board, you need to really reflect upon it and see what your purpose is. You know, for example, there's a lot of like ERG, a lot of like groups and organizations like that, like, you know, we have a group for this, you know, LGBTQ plus, we have, you know, an Indigenous American group. We have a lot of different groups, and they're great if they're inclusive. If they're just a group for just people to talk amongst themselves about what's working and not working, then all it creates are silos, and it's not inclusive. Like all the groups should be welcoming. All the groups should be sponsored in a way that they're providing education and support to everyone in the organization. And so I think, you know, like I said, so from the recruitment, you know, and the new hires, doing things in a way where people are humanized, humanizing people in a way where it's across the board in the organization will get you a lot further than just really focusing on the new hires who then come in, and then there's people who haven't gotten what they've gotten that are now having to train them. you know, it's real, like a lot of meaningful conflict. One thing is the middle managers in most organizations, I say that the C-suite tries to define the culture. The middle managers, first line supervisors, they're running with it. Like, and what I've learned is that we're neglecting first line supervisors and middle level managers. We're neglecting them and really putting them in a situation where they get negative both ways. They're getting negative from all the problems they've got to deal with their staff. They're dealing with all the problems they have to deal with the administrators above them. And they're just caught in the middle, making $2 or $3 more an hour than their staff, thinking, what in the hell is this? Right? And so what I've learned is that really focusing on the trainers of these new hires, the first line supervisors of these new hires, making sure they're cared for and they're trained in a way where they can be supportive is everything. One of the most common things I see is, hey, Desmond, this is a great training, but my first line supervisor is still treating me like crap. You know? And so if we're not like empowering our first line supervisors, caring for our first line supervisors, then we're going to see the issues, the ongoing issues with incoming staff.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, Desmond, is once we create that plan, it needs to be operationalized across everything, and it can't be my twist on how we're going to be doing it. This is how we're doing it across the board at all levels, and we all have to step into it, and we all have to believe it. and we all have to accept it. Otherwise, probably from a core value standpoint, is a mismatch anyway, right?
Yes.
Right. It's
Yes.
probably it's not the right job for someone who's not willing to embrace it.
No, Kati, you're on point. I'd add one more word, modeling. We have to model. We have to model it.
Yeah.
The strongest implementation of work is modeling. I tell people all the time, and they think I'm weird, but it's just truthful what I tell them. I said, ever since I went to preschool, my parents have taught me how to be safe as a Black male in America. Be careful how you behave. Be careful how people respond to you. If you feel you're in danger, walk away. If there's an issue, do this. If someone comes to you in the middle of the night, call us. Get it at the time, there's a payphone. Get a payphone and call us. Like my whole life since I was in preschool, I've been trained to behave or act in certain ways to make sure my environment is safe as I can control. And so I've received a PhD starting at the age of 4.5 to now of understanding people, understanding the energy they bring, understanding the safety they bring or lack thereof, understanding their frustrations and anger. I am just focused on the nuances of people that I work with, for good or bad. And so when you come to me with this great DEI project, right, or this great initiative that we're going to do, and I'm using my skills, I'm 49 now, I'm using my 45 years worth of skill to evaluate you as a person. I'm going to have a pretty clean sense on whether you're genuine or not about the work you're going to do, or whether this is just one more thing that you've been obligated to do as my supervisor.
Checkbox, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one in society that has been trained for safety to pick up on the nuances of others. I know women will tell me all the time, Desmond, you don't, at least you can walk around at night. You know, is it like I've talked to women who say, oh my goodness, like that has been my experience. Ever since I've grown up, I've been very sensitive for my safety. And so people know when people are authentic. They know when things matter to them. And so a lot of times we have these leaders that are going through the motions of the work, and people know just before they even open their mouths whether it's something authentic and real or whether it's something they're just going through the motions of. And that's one of the reasons that DEI processes often fail.
But tell me about the process you guys have at Arbinger, and please share a little bit about Arbinger and what
Sure.
it is that you do and how you go into organizations to create impact.
So yeah, we are a organizational change organization. We work on mindset change. And one of our mottos is we like to humanize the workplace. We go into organizations through consulting and training, and we help create a common language. We call it the outward mindset. Our ability to see people as people, or our ability to see people as objects. And in the process of creating this language, we have multiple curriculums: outward performance, outward leadership, outward inclusion, or just three trainings we have to help humanize the process, whether it's in performance, whether it's in leadership, or whether it's in inclusion work, to humanize the process in a way in which people have a sense of our authenticity, in a way in which people feel seen and they respond based upon it. And we have multiple frameworks built around this understanding that by humanizing another person, it's our quickest way to create resolution in most of our most complicated circumstances and situations.
Amazing. And I'll be providing your contact information and Arbinger's if anyone wants to reach out to you and needs that support to bring that into their organization. But if they wanted to do it on their own, if they're so passionate about creating this sense of community and belonging and just being heard and being present, how do they go about it themselves? Like, what's the first thing? You talked about a common language, but maybe
Yeah.
that's beyond them, right? Maybe that's an
Yeah.
organizational thing. Just within their team, what can they do?
Well, there's a few basics. You can start by reading. We have a couple bestseller books. One's called Leadership and Self-Deception. It's on Amazon, one of the top bestsellers in organizational behavior work. And one book is called Anatomy of Peace. It's probably one of the number 1 or number 2 conflict resolution books on Amazon. And then the third book we have called The Outward Mindset. So those are good foundational books that you can start to read. You can read them as a team and start to get some of that language together. We also have public workshops. You can go to www.arbinger.com. Yeah, it's people like Arbinger. It's Arbinger, but Arbinger is the name. www.arbinger.com, and there's public workshops you can sign up for there as well to take a deeper dive in some of the things I'm talking about. We have a bunch of different mechanisms. Like I said, some from the options of just grabbing one of those books to signing up for a public workshop. We have a bunch of options that we offer as an organization.
But it seems that as long as someone is open to having those half-hour meetings that you were having with your team, with sounds like with existing and new people, we just really need to open up the door for bringing our full person to work, our full self to work. And
I love that.
Yeah, just really look at people as if they're for who they are. They're human beings. They're not the admin. They're not the tech guy. They're not the designer. They're a human being. There's a human being there with challenges, struggles, aspirations, all of that. And we need to see that.
Yes. And I will throw one more nugget out there for you. Something you think that the podcast can reflect upon. When I don't see the humanity of another person, then I spend a lot of time justifying why they're not human or not as human as I am. And when I stay in that justification, I form bonds of anguish and frustration with those individuals. And so when we're asking you to see people as people, we're not asking you to be like, some type of like, just only see the good side of people, or, take a Mother Teresa approach to life where, you're giving everything of yourself. What we're asking for you to do by seeing another person's humanity is breaking free of the bonds of anguish that are associated with seeing them as an object. We're asking for emotional and cognitive freedom when you see the humanity of another person. It's a much better place to start when you're looking at the challenges and conflicts of your life. If you start with objectification, it's always going to be much more difficult to resolve something than when you start with acknowledging another person's humanity. And like I said, someone's like, "Oh, duh," that's what somebody's saying. I can feel it. But I'm telling you, we all struggle with this. And it's just a dilemma that we got to learn to face in the midst of doing our work, doing our busy work, and accomplishing the tasks that we need to do at work.
And that's probably it. We're so busy running around in 10 different directions that it feels like, oh, but if I take a pause back and connect with you, I don't have time for that. So can you do whatever you need to do? And right. And
Yep. So Kati, you're on point. We don't see it as a part of a long-term solution, taking that 15 to 20 minutes to understand a person more deeply, to help that person to solve their own concerns. We're more likely to get the accountability that we seek than objectification that's associated with correction. Right.
Yeah. And it goes back to the whole impact piece. If I'm correcting you all the time, then I may not realize it. My intent may be just to let's get it done quickly, but the impact that I'm leaving with you as well, you can't do it yourself. So let me do it for you. That's a whole
Yes.
nother, that's a whole nother
Yeah.
conversation there too.
Beautifully stated.
Well, beautiful, Desmond. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking about what it means to be inclusive, what it means to create a space of belonging in a work organization. But really, we're talking about beyond that. We're talking about just in any interaction between any two people. That's really
Yeah.
what we're talking about.
Yeah. I've learned something. This recent quote I heard was like, when you interact with people, you want to leave them better than what they came, you know, like the goal in life is to leave a person better off with the experience you've had with them than when they first interacted with you. And I've made my mistakes and had my struggles in life for sure to accomplish that. But I think being much more aware that that's a process for me has been very helpful, to recognize that each person is a person. And one of my goals in life is to improve my impact on that person. I think is very powerful.
It is very, very powerful. Thank you for sharing that message with everyone. If we all
Thank
could do
you.
that, just, beautiful world it would be.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes, it would be. I agree.
Well, thank you so much again. As we wrap this conversation, I will share the books that you mentioned. I know you've authored some of them. The Anatomy of Peace, incredibly impactful. I got a chance to get that when we were at ATD.
Fantastic.
But I want to thank you for taking the time to being here with us and really talking about this really, really incredibly important conversation, not just because we need to check a box, but because we all need to see each other as the humans that we are.
Yes. And I will add, I didn't author the Arbinger Institute as a whole authors every book. Okay. Yeah. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
They are amazing books. They are,
thank you.
But the Arbinger, so you'll find the books on Amazon as the Arbinger Institute. They're actually listed there as an institute.
Yep. Perfect. I'll absolutely provide the links there as well.
Thank you, Kati. I appreciate your time. Thank you for the invitation. And thank you for being the type of human being that's willing to lean into conversations that I think create solutions where we often don't see solutions. Some people see this space as a dilemma that we have to overcome or try to figure out, but really there is a lot of solutions in the inclusion space. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of your podcast.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Desmond.
Thank you, Kati.